Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 62, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today is part 3 of the Archery DIY report with Greg Litzinger, and we're covering archery practice habits to take to the timber, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast DIY report this week, number 3, with Greg Litzinger, covering some archery topics. Always fun to catch up with Greg and talk some archery. He's, of course, I think I mentioned in some previous podcasts, he's really helped me out a lot with some of the issues that I was having, and I kind of dive into a few of those in this next upcoming podcast. You know, I'd struggled for a little while last year, didn't want to admit it, but was having some challenges keeping my pin on target. And fortunately, you know, I had an outing with Greg one day at the range, and we kind of went through some things, and he kind of gave me some tools to help with the, you know, target panic or whatever you want to call it. And also kind of helped me out with some of my form and stuff like that was going to help me be a better and more consistent shot. And those two things have really kind of proven out. So I think, you know, today's podcast is really kind of about, you know, setting those practice habits that you can then take those same habits and apply them once you hit the timber, or if you're shooting 3D or whatever the case might be. But it's really about laying the groundwork and the foundation. That way, whenever you're in those high intensity or those quote unquote moments of truth, that you're able to perform as you have during your practicing. With that in mind, today we're going to, as we're talking about all things archery related, you know, one of the other things that I had changed over, and this was more of a gear related thing, was I guess it was 2 years ago, I started shooting Trophy Ridge React sights. And for me, I was always concerned with my ability to sight in accurately all of my pins. The reason being is that, you know, usually my 20-yard pin, I was always usually pretty good at getting that set. But as I would kind of get further and further away, of course, you know, human error becomes more and more apparent. You know, so maybe you're a little left, maybe you're a little right, maybe you're a little high, a little low. And it becomes a little harder, at least in my mind, to differentiate whether it's, you know, in fact, I need to make a sight adjustment, or if it is, in fact, me as the shooter that is causing some of the, you know, the different high, low, left, right kind of scenarios. And so more than anything, you know, changing to the React kind of sight, it allowed me to have confidence in my yardage, right? So I knew once I had it set, I knew that I was going to be accurate at 20, 30, 40, and 50, because at that time I was shooting a 5-pin sight, their React Pro. And then this year I had moved to the React Alpha 1, so it was their new single-pin sight, because I had mentioned in a previous podcast I started shooting with both eyes open, and a 5-pin was really kind of hard. You know, I was having a hard time getting on the right pin and focusing on the right pin. My eye wanted to kind of always move to that 20-yard pin. So I changed over to a single pin, and it made a big difference in just kind of giving me the confidence whenever I moved to the React technology to know that my yardages are set, they're correct, and it kind of took the guesswork out for me. I think part of the battle in archery, you know, and we talk about a little bit today with Greg, it's just confidence, not only in your shot sequence and all those things, but it's also confidence in the fact that, you know, the things that you're using, you know, whether it's a Trophy Ridge React sight, or whether it's, you know, the release that you're using, or the actual bow that you're using. If you have confidence in the things that you're using, you're typically probably going to shoot a little bit better. So with that spirit in mind here, I'm going to pick this up. We're going to do a giveaway today, and I'm going to give away a Trophy Ridge React sight, the React H4. It comes with the React technology, of course. That's where you can set the 20-yard pin, and once you set the 20, your 30, 40, 50 will be set from just based on the you know, the velocity of your bow and the trajectory of your arrow at those different distances. It has 4 .019 horizontal fiber optic pins with rheostat light. It has a second axis leveling. And this one, of course, is the H4, so it's a 4-pin, and it has your sight adjustments out to 50 yards. The cool thing about these is when you start sighting in out at 50, and you start really kind of dialing it in out at those distances, it tightens up every other pin in front of it. So if you're shooting out to 50, and you're tightening in that 50-yard pin, man, your 40, 30, and 20-yard pin really gets tight. So in order to win this, or the way you can win this, is I'm going to, I just ask you do three simple, really simple things. All you need to do is like and follow both the Truth from the Stand Facebook page and the Instagram page. The second step is like the podcast Instagram post related to this specific podcast. So this will be podcast number 62, if I'm not mistaken. And then the third thing you'll need to do is comment on this podcast's Instagram post with hashtag Trophy Ridge. You do those three things and you will be in the running for the React H4, Trophy Ridge React H4. So I'll go over those one more time. First thing you need to do is make sure that you have liked or are following the Truth from the Stand Facebook and Instagram pages. You're going to want to like the podcast Instagram post related to this podcast, number 62. And then you're going to want to comment on this podcast number 62's Instagram post with hashtag Trophy Ridge. You do those three things, and I'll make a random drawing. I'm going to let this kind of roll out for 2 weeks from today, and then I'll pick the winner at random. It'll be on Wednesday, May 30th. So you do those couple things, and I'll be slinging one of these sweet Trophy Ridge React H4s in your direction. And I'll, of course, contact you, get your shipping information, and get this to you. That way we can get it on your bow, and you can have some fun with it and kind of get dialed in and ready for the season, which is fast approaching. So with that, we won't belabor any longer. We'll go ahead and kind of get ready to get cracking with Greg and talk some archery tips and techniques related to practice. But before we do that, let's take a quick moment to talk about our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. First and foremost, Wicked Tree Gear, the longest lasting, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We're also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. The new Exodus Trek is a byproduct of all the consumer voices who have been excited about what Exodus Trail Cameras has to offer, but just can't fit a $200 camera in their budget, and that's okay. A budget-friendly camera backed by the industry's leading warranty is now here. The Trek is $145, and it has the same proprietary shell design as the Lift series cameras, same 5-year warranty and unmatched customer service, 0.7 second trigger speed, video, photo, time-lapse, hybrid modes, all with a single line backlit LED display for easy setup. You also get about 20,000 images on a set of lithium batteries. And if you'd like to learn more about Exodus trail cameras, check them out at exodusoutdoorgear.com. And if you like what you see there, save yourself $20. Use the promo code TRUTH at checkout. And with that, let's go ahead and talk to the Bowhunting Fiend. All right, folks, we are live, and welcome back to another episode of the DIY Report, Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Again, joined by my friend, the Bowhunting Fiend, hailing from the Garden State of New Jersey, weighing in at a svelte 185 pounds. I don't even know if that's right.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Maybe 162.
With 162, sorry, man.
Yeah.
Coming in at
a little something muscle,
age 40 with a scratched cornea.
Yes.
Greg, what's going on, my man?
What's happening, man?
Oh, just enjoying talking some archery with you, buddy.
Yeah, this is what, number 3 of our little...
It's the Trace.
Yeah.
The Trace.
Whatever.
They say it's the best one. The third time's the charm. So
hopefully,
if
the first two might be, I feel sorry for your listeners. Maybe
right,
they like to babble on sometimes. So
if out there, if you're listening, if you thought the first two sucked, we're going to do a lot better this time. So
if they make it a third, God bless you.
Nice. But today's episode, we're talking about practice habits, right? So far during this series, we've really talked about selecting your right bow. And then we've really talked about, being consistent in some different form and technique things, from, peep sights to kisser buttons to, the type of releases that you might use and so forth. And so now what we want to do is take all this stuff that we've learned and we've got our bow and we're going to go to the range now and we're going to start shooting and think about if I've got all these things in place, right? I've got the bow at the right draw length. I have one that fits me well. I'm comfortable with it. I've chosen the right sight. I've chosen the right release, all these things. I'm going to now take it to the range, and what are the things I need to do at the range now to help me be a better shooter? And the one thing that I started doing, and I've heard pros and cons of this, I've heard guys talk about it in different ways, is blank bailing. Yeah. I've heard some guys talk about it in the sense that they love it, and it actually helped me out a lot last year. So I'm in the camp of that I really like it. You know what I mean? Because it took the pressure away of being on a target.
I was able just to kind of concentrate on feeling how the bow was going to release and that everything was kind of aligned. And then I've heard other guys talk about that blank bailing, like you don't shoot at something without a target. So you would never deer hunt without a target,
Yes.
right? You would never spot shoot a competition without a target, right? So why would you ever practice a scenario that's never going to be a real life scenario? And I see validity to both sides, right? So I just wanted to kind of start there with blank bailing. Like, is it something you prescribe to? Is it something that you've used? Do you?
Absolutely. I think for me, coming from when I transitioned from being an index, trigger shooter to shooting, with a hinge, that method of blind bailing, helped me get comfortable shooting with that. And by comfortable shooting, I mean by feel, drawing the bow the same. I had mirrors to the front and to the side of me. I'd watch myself draw, and then close my eyes and shoot. And I did that for, probably a little too much because there was, like you said, there was no target time. But I was trying to instill good habits because I had 20 years of terrible habits to make up for.
Right.
And the only way to do that is to learn a new a month of doing something, and I spent months and probably thousands of arrows,
Right.
shooting with my eyes closed or shooting with no target face or putting. I would change it up, if you put tape over my peep sight, everything's still there because I don't want to take my sight off my bow or no target or shoot my eyes closed. So I changed it up a little bit, but it allowed me to feel what a good shot felt like. And sometimes that's all you need because it builds your confidence. When, a lot of people are so they're outcome oriented. They're worried about the score.
Right.
Don't worry about the score. The score will take care of itself. If I can take care of, the 6 inches between my ears, as my coach told me.
Right.
And my little 3-foot circle around me, the score will take care of itself. If you work on this, the score will work. The score will get better. And a lot of people rush. They want to get to the end, and they kind of try and leapfrog some steps. And next thing you know, you're back at ground, back at stage one again, trying to. So it is a long learning curve. And a lot of the average people that's been shooting, that have bad habits, who's shooting 10, 15 years, even 5 years. I know how to shoot a bow. I can do this for a week and I'll be good.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
Or if you're a genetic freak, yeah, it could possibly happen. Or if you're really, strict and disciplined, yeah. But the average person, in my opinion, is not. I'm not. I'm pretty strict and disciplined, but I'm not that strict and disciplined.
Yeah, I'm personally pretty neurotic about things in general. Whenever I get into something, it's like, I'm all in. It's just kind of how I am. But last year, I would start every session at the archery range because I was dealing with I know target panic is one of those things that people say, some people say it's target panic. Other people don't subscribe to that kind of, that terminology, I guess, right? Whatever we call it, I was beginning to have some struggles with punching my trigger. I was starting to have some struggles I was never off the target. I was having some struggles getting the target or getting my pin.
Freezing below it.
Yeah, just a hair below always. Just a hair below it always. And so I recognized that. And so instead of being ignorant and going, I don't have target panic or I'm not having a problem, whatever you want to call it, I recognized that I was having a problem, right? So I needed to start to build some confidence and just in how I feel because I was worried about everything that was going on. I was worried about setting my anchor points. I was worried about where my hand was in terms of my release position. I was worried about where my string was at, where my peep was at. I was thinking about all these things, which you want to have a process, you know what I mean? But it was taking away to the point that I was now struggling with the shot. You know what I mean? So when I got to the shot, I was already worked up. Yeah. So what I started doing is after you and I talked, it's I would start every session at the archery range by just standing 5 feet in front of the bags, pulling back with my eyes closed, setting my anchor points, and then just letting arrows rip. And I would just start there. And that's where I would start because I just wanted to feel what it would feel like to have shots break and feel good. Yep. You know what I mean?
And you can run your mental program when you do that. Speaking of the mental program.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the next thing I wanted to ask about was shot sequence. But so, yeah.
Yeah, and your brain's, it's complicated, but not complicated. Your brain can pretty much only do one thing at a time. And when you're rushing through your shot sequence or thinking about everything, you're not thinking about aiming. And that is the key. Like, so many people focus on the shooting aspect and focusing on about the arrow hitting the target, but they're missing some of the steps in between.
Right.
Like, there's some command shooters out there that can shoot. All right, I'm going to squeeze a trigger and I'm going to, crush that X. And they, Tim Gillingham, they call him, his nickname was the Hammer. Like, he could literally, he's a command shooter. He knows when that thing's going off, pulling the trigger. I am not built that way. My brain's so active, I shoot subconsciously. I just want to aim, and the shot breaks, be it 6 seconds or 8 seconds. It's good. If it don't break, I let down, and kind of regroup. But so blank bailing and blind bailing helped me to set up my shot, aware of what I'm doing. All right, anchor here, nose, I'm level, and a shot breaking. So I can tell myself aim, and just pull through that shot, and the shot breaks. So when I transitioned to paper, at 10 yards, I was comfortable with aim. I retrained my brain, how to, execute a shot that works for me. Everybody's different. And me and my coach, we worked hard on that, like the mental aspect of shooting, not necessarily the physical aspect, because there's so many variables, injuries and stuff. But it's in your brain that makes good shots happen.
Right.
So blind bailing, blank bailing, and then going to the range helped me substantially. So your shot process for me is I'm constantly aware of everything, and then I have a trigger point. Like, I'm aware of, I'm focusing on this, I'm focusing on the target. I get target acquisition. Once I get to the point where my thumb kind of comes off the peg, I go into aim. And just aim, and subconsciously I activate the shot. I don't say, all right, squeeze my hand, do all this stuff.
Right.
So I have a system that I've built up over the years that I use it for every shot, whether I'm shooting in my house, or shooting at 90 yards. It doesn't deviate. And that's how you become a good shot. You become pretty much a machine. You don't change one. You change one, you change the input, you're going to change the output.
Right.
And sometimes you get away with, I barely got that shot off, but I got the action. You squeeze, you're like, that thing was terrible. But you know what? You're good. You look at it like, all right, I need work. And then,
right. It's funny because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening, because this happens to me too when I go to the range, because like the whole shot sequence thing is something that's relatively new to me. You know what I mean? It's like where I'm being more conscious about it.
Yes.
And I notice myself at times at the range, I'll be shooting. It happens a lot at distance when I'm shooting out to, like, for me, distance is like 60 to 70 yards, right? And where I'm shooting and I'm like, I let one rip and I'm like, ooh, but I hit the mark and I'm just like, that was luck. And that was like, I don't know how it happened. The shot was all wrong. I rushed it. You know what I mean? I didn't have control over my shot. You know what I mean? I still managed to hit the same place. Some people will get false confidence in that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, as opposed to like thinking like, even though I hit where I wanted to hit, my shot would have been better if I would have controlled it and maybe hit 2 inches lower than what I hit, because at least then I was controlling where the arrow was going. Whereas this shot, it hit where I wanted it to hit, but I couldn't do it again if I had to. Possibly, right? And it's funny because there's a guy, I forget the guy's name. He has a website. I forget his name, but he's a guy who's taught a lot of shooting for like police and I believe like some military stuff.
The Iron Hill shooter guy.
I forget. It's
Shot Inc. or something.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And
Yeah,
he talks a lot about like open and closed loop, like processing for like different pieces of your shot and stuff like that, which was tremendously helpful, kind of checking some of the stuff out. Because one thing that I've kind of picked up, and like I said, like everyone picks up pieces that worked for them, right? And one thing that I started doing was talking to myself through my shot, like everything from like, okay, you're going to draw now. Right. Yep. And what it did for me was not necessarily, it didn't change anything about how I do it. It changed how much mindfulness I had about what I was doing.
You're self-aware of what you're doing.
Right. And it didn't, and when I say it slowed me down, it didn't physically slow me down. It slowed my brain down from getting from draw to the shot without thinking about the other things that have to happen in between.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because some people will say, well, then how can you get a shot off in time for a deer? Because sometimes it's a split second. It's like, all these things will happen within like 2 seconds. You know what I mean? But it's like, I'll tell myself, okay, draw. And then I'll say, you're anchored. Like after I hit all my anchor points, I'm like, you're anchored. And then I'll say something to myself like, you're ready or go ahead or whatever. And then the last thing I say is pull through, pull through, pull through, pull through. And you say aim, aim, aim. I say pull through, pull through. But what I'm doing is I'm focusing on that target, and my pull through is just happening.
Yes,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? And once I started doing that, like, man, I became way more calm in my shot sequence and started being able to
you
like
can
repeat
control
it.
your emotions that way too.
Yeah.
Like I said, because so many people, like you were saying, a guy, well, you got to get a shot off on a deer real fast. So they're so worried about the outcome, they're not really conscious of what they're doing up to that. Well, there's a 50-50 chance you're shanking that deer. You know, you're flanking him, you're missing him, and that is the worst. I'd rather my shot not go off and that buck or doe live. We do battle another day, because in this world now it's so driven by the outcome, the results, and it's a process.
Yeah.
And like you said, when you have a system down, you're constantly aware of what you're doing. You're self-aware, and you're focusing on that. You're not focusing on anything else, and the brain's doing one thing at a time. And over, a course of months, years, you become a very good shooter, because subconsciously you do everything. When I first transitioned into hinge, like my coach had me write down a shot sequence, how many steps I need for a shot to go off. I mean, it was like 37 steps or something crazy.
Right.
I'm like, what?
Right.
I'm like, that's insane. He goes, well, you're retraining your brain. So before every shot, look at this, be aware of it. Boom, boom, boom. When I would read it, and then pretty soon, 37 became 35, became 30, because I built up muscle memories. Now I don't think about 90% of the stuff that most people do, because I do it subconsciously. I'm not aware of what I'm doing. It's like tying your shoe. You don't look like, all right, loop it, swoop it, pull it. It just happens.
I
naturally.
still say that, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But so if you have a system set up, gun shooting, since I became proficient at hinge shooting and having steps, I can pick up a handgun, almost any handgun, and shoot it extremely well, because it's the same thing,
right?
Same mental pattern.
Yeah.
As with any, it's transitioned into me welding and doing stuff at work. It's the same thing. I have a system now, and I've become much more efficient in a lot of things that I do, because of having a shot sequence from archery, which is weird.
It's crazy, because like what you said is right, man, because it's one of those things where, just think about, I'm going to get a little hippy dippy here, but just, get groovy, man. Where are the ludes?
Yeah.
it's like the 70s, right?
The
ludes dude.
Showing her age.
It's Dennis Leary's called the ludes dude, man. So it's one of those things where, and you hit on it, it helps you be better at a lot of different things outside of just shooting, right? And I think if we just stopped for a second and we thought about how often, and just if we were all just honest with ourselves, right, and said, how often do we stop and actually just think about like what we're actually doing, right? Being mindful about an approach to something, right? When you just take a couple seconds to stop to think about, is this the right way to solve this? Is this the right thing I should say right now? Is this the right, like any number of things, right? That ability to slow yourself and have a process, and archery is able to kind of give you that perspective, right? Some people ask me why I like archery so much, archery hunting or just shooting a bow. Shooting a bow for me is, 20 yards of therapy at a time. You know what I mean? It's like I get to think and rethink my shot as I walk up to get my arrows, as I walk back from picking up my arrows. Sometimes I'm thinking about my shot. Sometimes I'm thinking about the argument I had at work. Sometimes I'm thinking about the argument you have with your significant other or whatever. It's that opportunity to just think about things.
And your arrows, the arrow doesn't lie too.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. If you're not in it, like 100% into that, like each arrow should get 100%.
Yeah.
You can shoot 100 arrows, but you might be a proficient archer, but if you shoot 10 arrows that are focused on those 10 arrows, you're gonna be way more efficient in your shooting. And
100%.
And if you're just give 100% attention to that arrow, what you're doing, constantly aware of what you're doing, and then subconscious
words.
Yeah, too many of them.
Yeah, part 2, it happened too. It's like dabba too. It's those ludes, man.
Yeah, man.
Gotcha.
What's in this water, man? But so if you just be aware of what you're doing, you'll become a better shooter. But a lot of people are so rushed to learn a new technique, or I'm having trouble. I want to go buy a new bow or a new sight.
That'll
new
solve
sight,
it.
New bow is not going to help you become a better archer. And like I said, being just self-aware of what you're doing is critical to archery or life in general, or even hunting, scouting. And
Right. Yeah.
you're self-aware of what you're doing. I'm walking in, there's a deer trap, there's a rub, there's all these things, and you know, and it really is kind of goes hand in hand for me. Since I've become a better archer, I've become a significantly better hunter.
Right.
Which in turn I've become a better person. There's a whole,
It's a whole ecosystem
Yeah.
of how it helps you. And that's, I think the funny part is like people don't recognize that if you let yourself get in it and just kind of give yourself up to it and allow it to kind of take over and allow it to provide you a process for managing things, there's a lot of things that it helps fix,
And I'm a big guy and I listen to Lanny Basham, mental management stuff. They talk about attainment a lot. Like I might not win every tournament. I might win 1 out of 5, but it's what you become in that process.
Right.
That makes you who you are.
You become a better version of yourself each time. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the goal, right?
And they said, and shooting, before we get too
deep.
Too off track.
Like we are in the Truth from the Stand hookah lounge.
Yeah.
So it's getting weird.
Let's pump the brakes here.
Hold on, let me get my lava lamp out.
Yeah. But yeah, so for the listeners who actually listened the last few minutes, but return listeners, but just have a process on what you're doing and write it down. And that's a big thing that I found works for me. Write my process down. And I said my coach, he had me write a thing of how many steps does it take to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Right.
There's a lot of steps.
Right.
So many steps that you would not even think about. I was like, wow, I got like 4 or 5. He's like, no, there's probably 20 plus. I'm like, I don't see how. He's like, get up off the chair, go to the cabinet.
It's everything.
Yeah. So archery is the same thing. When you want to learn a new habit, there's going to be some struggle. It's going to get rough, but you got to push through that and stay focused. Give yourself 3 months. A lot of people want it now. So many people are outcome oriented. Take the baby steps, man. You got to relearn, especially if you're trying to relearn good habits. It's going to take some time. Old habits die hard. I still get old stuff, coming through. Like if I put it, I was so bad with index trigger release. If I put one on now, like, man, these things are cool. I can shoot them. Within 10 shots, I'm like, barrel, like finger popping. And it's like, get this thing away from me. Like it's just old habits die hard, you know? So.
Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Hardcore deer hunters need tools that can keep up. We don't baby our gear and taking on whatever Mother Nature dishes out. Check out Wicked Tree Gear hand saws and pole saws at wickedtreegear.com. Use promo code TRUTH to save yourself 20% on your next purchase with free ground shipping. And get a saw that's tough enough to work as hard as you hunt.
So what do you think, as far as... Let's talk a little bit about shooting 3D in competition and how that helps you become a better archer. In your opinion, like your approach, like has shooting competitively and then shooting 3D targets helped you up your game?
Absolutely. Knock on wood. Hopefully this is wood, but
it's something.
Yeah, it's vintage.
It is vintage.
But shooting, since I started competing, really, full on competing and taking, and even I did 3D for about a year before I started competing, I guess, and I haven't lost a deer. I've made one shot that wasn't so well, but I still found the deer.
Right.
So it puts you in uncomfortable situations. Everybody's good in their backyard. Everybody's good in the basement. But you go to a new range you've never been, new footing, new targets, new people. It can be nerve-wracking. It tests your nerves. It tests your range, your range estimation abilities. You're shooting with people you don't know. You're out of your comfort zone, out of your wheelhouse, and it forces you to,
focus or suck.
Yeah. I remember my first tournament. I was like, man, I'm gonna smoke this thing. My adrenaline was surging so bad I couldn't get shots to go off. I thought I was like, I'm gonna rip my bow in half. Like I was just so angry. Like the first 10 targets, and I'll never forget these two guys. They kind of made fun of me, and it pissed me off because I'm watching these guys shoot. I was like, I'm better than both of you.
Right.
And if I flipped that switch, as my coach called me, I'm a reactive. At the time, I was a very reactive shooter. Like I needed something, to force me to get my shit together and start shooting well.
Right.
Whatever they did, I went on a tear. It was like I shot 11 X's in a row. Just absolute crushing. I was like, where was this?
5 shots ago.
Yeah, but it was new people, new terrain. I put myself paid $40 whatever to shoot. And I took something I never done before. It was like, and I didn't know what to do. I was splashing in the water. I was drowning basically, and it took an asshole basically.
They're good for something once in a while.
And but I still get that sometimes, like that adrenaline surge. Last year and drove all the way to Virginia to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I just picked up a used bow. I wanted to shoot a hunting bow. I got rid of my target bow, and I was like, I'm gonna shoot a basic cheap bow. So I bought a bow for $200,
mm-hmm.
and I really couldn't shoot it that well, but I wanted to see what I could do with a lower grade bow.
Right.
And I shot really well, like the first 3 targets, but I was so amped up. I mean, like a deer was coming at me. Like that's how adrenaline was surging. I was like, this is amazing. And I still executed. And first 3 targets, X, coming out of the gate. I'm like, man, this is money. And, I don't know what happened. I lost my focus because maybe that very rarely happens. I get 3 X's out of the gate. And then I'm like, man, this is easy. Boom, let my guard down for like 3 shots. And it was like,
fell apart.
Yeah. And then I had to like climb back out. So it forces you to, competitive archery shooting or even just 3D shooting in general with people you don't know, forces you to become better or become shittier.
Right. It forces you to reckon with yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Whether it's the good version or the bad version at that moment. And I think that stress, that's one of the reasons why I like to go to the range occasionally. I shoot every day at my house, but I know that that's a controlled environment.
Yes.
I need to go where people are going to watch me, other people are going to be shooting. And it's made me a lot more comfortable in my shot to where I'm able to kind of block out what everyone else is doing around me and just shoot, which has helped me a ton in the tree stand. So I want that to be kind of like the last part of part 3 here. So I want to talk about all the stuff we've talked about in this section as far as like your shot sequence. Cause like I mentioned earlier, when you're doing that conscious, like going through your shot process and sequence, with the concern that it might slow you down and miss that shot opportunity. So how do you take all these skills, right, and learned techniques and so forth, and then apply them in a tree stand whenever you're under the most hunting pressure or most shot pressure you might ever face? You got that giant once in a lifetime buck that you've watched for 3 years and you've had near misses with him, but he's never come within bow range. Now all of a sudden here he is.
That's
right?
never happened to me, so I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
Can't talk about that.
Every buck, every large buck I've ever killed, I see him. As soon as I seen him, I killed him. I've never seen him before. Never seen him. So nice. I'm a one and done kind of guy.
Right. Nice.
But what you do, you build up muscle memory. Like all my my largest bucks and even some of the does I've killed, it seems to happen so slow. Like time sits still for me. Like I'll pull back, and sometimes I remember pulling back, and I'll pull back. I'll get my sight on. I'm like, all right, sight's there, and then I'll almost like not black out, but it's so slow. And sometimes I'll be thinking to myself, I'm like, how come this release isn't going off? And it's like I feel almost like an out of body experience. Like sometimes I shot the 2 does this year. Like I literally could have swore I was looking at my release and I'm like, this thing isn't working. Right. Because it was so slow and I was so laser focused that I was like, I guess and I just remembered something like, just pull through. And it's like, and then boom, you snap back to reality, and the arrow hits. I couldn't tell you where my pin was. Like, even when I shoot 3D now, when I'm on, like, I don't know what pin I'm using. It's all subconsciously. Like, all right, that deer's whatever, that target's 35 yards. I can tell you what pin I use.
Right.
All I know is that I tell my brain it's 35, the brain does the rest. Right. All my big deer, same thing. I'm like, all right, that deer's 33. I couldn't tell you where my pin was when I shot him, but I heart shot him at 33 yards. Right. That's all I know.
Yeah.
So, and that's just muscle memory and being comfortable in.
But the thing is you're still conscious, right?
Yes.
Like you're not remembering everything that happened, right?
True.
But it's like you are still focused.
Yes.
I think that I want to make sure we mention that because it's not
it's
like it's you've thrown
focus.
it away.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because I'm the same way. It's like when I have made kill shots, I don't remember necessarily releasing the arrow, but what I do remember is watching the arrow pass through.
Yep.
Like I can see the arrow hit the target, you know what I mean, hit the animal, disappear.
Yep.
I've watched that happen. You know what I mean? So I know that I'm focusing, but it's just everything else has happened so much that I've put a process in place that I'm able to get back, get anchored, get into my position and squeeze that shot off the way it needs to be squeezed off. And I'm just watching that arrow pass through the animal.
And you're worried about I think for me, it's like with 3D and hunting, I'm so worried about where the arrow is going to hit. I'm not like muscle memory kicks in. Like I bypass all these steps because I'm so laser focused, and I think that's why at times sits still for me sometimes. I'm so focused on that. I wouldn't say a hair because I got terrible eyesight, but so focused on where I need. And shooting 3D helps because I know where to hit, where I'm shooting, and it's just I'm just looking at that. And I don't know what my pin's doing. I don't know what I'm aware of my bubble for a little bit. I'm constantly aware of the bubble, but when the shot breaks, I don't even know what happens. It's like boom, and then like it speeds up, and I film myself too. So I look at my shots, and it's nice to go back and look at the shots because it's like, oh, that's what it looks like. Because I'm so into that, and then watching where that deer goes, I don't really know what else is happening.
Right.
But I think it's just from building up that muscle memory and laser-like focus from actually being aware of what I'm doing.
Nice.
And I think a lot of people rush that. They see the deer and they're so worried about putting their hands on that deer or calling their buddy and bragging, yeah, I just shot a giant buck, instead of actually worrying about the process to get to that. Like, focus on that point of impact. That's all you need to focus on.
Right.
And you'll be better. You'll become a better hunter but so many people are like, all right, and if their bow's not set up properly, grip, hand, they start thinking too much.
Right.
And you can think yourself into a bad situation real fast.
Right.
Because then you're like, oh, there it is, and he's walking fast, and bow, and they hammer a trigger, which they never do, but they're rushed because they don't have a good.
The other thing is you often have more time than you think you do.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like when you see that deer approach, and you're like, I got to get the shot off in this window. It's like, yeah, that window might be small, but you have an opportunity, right? You have time to go through the process and don't outthink yourself, but you have time to make a good shot.
Exactly.
You don't have to rush it. You know what I mean? And then the second part of that is that if you have to rush it, should you be taking it in the first place?
Let it down.
You know what I mean?
And if you...
That was one of the things when we were shooting together for the first time that you told me that I took it away as like a really important thing for me. Because I don't shoot much with other people.
Yeah.
I don't shoot competitively or whatever. I was pulled back on one of the 3D targets, and it just didn't feel right. Now let it down, and you said that was your best shot today.
Yes.
And I was like, and like the thing went off my brain saying, okay, like that, it's making the right decisions.
And the let down is a lot of a training tool my coach instilled in me right from Jump Street, especially with a hinge, how to let down on a hinge, because I was so afraid to let down because it's going to go off. But if the shot ain't there, or if you pull back on a deer and you're like, I don't know if that tree or the yards, let down, because a shot is there's a 50% chance you're going to make a bad shot on a deer because you're not focused on that point of impact. You're focused on that branch, or is he 40 yards or is he 30 yards? The shot's broke down.
Right.
You can kind of muscle through, but you know what? I'd rather have that deer walk or regroup, for a second and then pull back real fast, and with a better mindset.
Right.
But so many people try and rush things and force things, through small holes as they're walking.
Right.
Very few people practice walking shots. Why take that shot? I don't care how big the deer is. Because odds are there's 50% chance you're going to shoot it in the guts, and that deer's going to haunt your dreams. It's going to make you think twice about shooting at another deer because you're like, I gut shot a deer. Well, you just put
the X on yourself there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So just focus. Lungs, heart, whatever it needs, whatever trigger you need to work, and just build on that. And that comes from months. That's where having months of training comes into play.
Right.
Like, Levi Morgans of the world, all these great archers, you see them on their TV shows and videos. They never make bad shots.
Right.
And if they do, it's the deer took a step or something like that. But you never hear them talk bad about themselves. I'm a terrible, I suck, or
right.
That's just, it's not a good way to build up your self-image. You make a bad shot on a deer, regroup, think like,
what can I do better?
Right. Yeah. How can I make this better? And then constantly aware to not make that happen again.
Right. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground in this one, talking about practice habits, everything from blank bailing, shot sequence, lewds. We got the lewds in there. We got to make sure we got the hookah lounge. So I think we're good to shut this one down. And thanks for joining, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, gang, that's a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Greg for joining. Be sure to give him a follow on Instagram if you are not doing so already. And we would, of course, like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. That would be super awesome. Also, don't forget to enter the Trophy Ridge H4 React Site giveaway. 3 ways you can get involved in that is, first and foremost, you need to be following and or have liked both the Truth from the Stand Facebook and Instagram pages. Second, you're going to want to like the podcast Instagram post, podcast number 62, on Instagram. So make sure you like that post. Number 3, comment on this podcast, number 62, on the Instagram post related to this podcast with hashtag Trophy Ridge. You do those 3 things, and I'll do a random drawing on May 30th and get the site out to the winner. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, and Trophy Taker Rests. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I gotta get right.